Okay, I think we are live. Tonight we have a special guest, Jeff Ignatowski. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Jeff, for being here, for accepting the invitation. I have to confess that I didn't know anything about you. Uh, as you know, maybe you know, but I'm gonna tell you, I'm obsessed with the Delphi case. So I used to check every day in YouTube who's posting something about Delphi, and just by chance, one of the YouTube recommendations, I saw your videos about Delphi, and man, that was awesome. I really love the way you presented the summary of the case. I think you made 3 episodes, and then I was looking in internet, who's this guy to prepare the show for tonight, and oh my God, I was surprised. You are an inventor. You invented a killing game. You're gonna tell us about that soon. You are a writer. I saw you were doing like Spartan games. It's crazy. You're like very polyvalent. So maybe we can start with that, Jeff. Can you tell us something about you?
Yeah, I have it has been a crazy, crazy journey. I have done all kinds of things, been all over the world. I started out actually a long time even before that. I was in ministry, right? And I was pastoring and doing all that. It's where I got a lot of my public speaking skills, really. I spent a lot of time doing that. And then when I left that, I ended up getting involved in Spartan Race, and I literally went. I did an event in Beijing. I did one in Scotland, and traveled the
Wow.
world with them doing the ultra endurance events that they do. I did at one time. I was the top male in the world for the event that they call the Agogi.
No
It
way.
is a multi-day, unsupported endurance event modeled after the Spartan Agogi that they use for their children and to raise them up and to train them. I spent a lot of time doing that, really just challenging myself to figure out who I was and how far I could push myself, both physically and mentally. I also fought professionally for a long time in mixed martial arts. So I have like run the gamut of things. But all of my life, I've been interested in true crime. I grew up around it. I grew up on the East Coast, right outside of Philadelphia. Half of my family is all Italian. I am not Italian at all. Obviously, my last name is Polish, but I'm half Filipino. My mom is full blooded. My dad is a quarter Polish and a quarter German. And so, like, half of my family was all like mobbed up on the East Coast. So, like, growing up, it's kind of in my blood. I grew up around all this stuff. And, my dad would tell me stories. He met Manson in the early 60s. So I grew
What?
up with that story.
Wow.
And, and so, like, my interest in true crime started really early. And of course, back then, because I was around all that stuff, I was like a budding little criminal myself. So, I kind of knew that end of it more so than the law enforcement side. And then later on, I became a corrections officer. I worked for the state in the Department of Juvenile Justice. So I worked with kids for, I don't know, about 15 years, working with kids, doing psychology with them. It's really where I got all of my early psychological training, was working with the Department of Juvenile Justice in Kentucky. And so, like, that really prepared me to understand some of the things that I do now. And because of all of those things, I really take things from a very ambiguous standpoint. I like to look at all of the points before I make a decision on how I think and what I feel about things. So I want to understand things from the prosecution side, from the defense side, from the conspiracy theorist side, and then I'll weigh in on what I believe and what I think about something when I'm actually informed. I often don't like to talk about stuff that I don't know, because I think it's really a lot of people do that. They don't look into things. They hear something that
Like
somebody
me.
says, and then they go on and they say, "Well, this is the truth," And it's like, well, you don't actually know that. You just heard somebody say that. So, where I don't claim to be an expert in anything. I do my research and I take the time to understand things before I sit there and expound on it, which is why, consequently, it took me a long time to come out with my Delphi series. I waited until I had as much information as I could get, and then I released it. Sometimes it's just kind of how I work things. But you asked about this too. What started me back into true crime was Killers the card game, and it's up over my shoulder here. That's the original box design. But I created a card game that you play as one of five. Well, you play as five different killers, and so you have to accumulate kills. You have to avoid the police. You got to avoid the other players. But the game itself has become the #1 true crime game of all time. We've in the last 3 years, I've done over 3,000 units in 8 different countries. It has been incredible. I really believe that people, when I started it out, were going to pick it and they were going to be like, I don't want to have anything to do with this guy. And it has been completely the opposite, because I think people understood that I didn't do it because I was trying to glorify anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I did it because I wanted people to understand, and I wanted people to be able to get into the mindset of some of these people and have kind of a safe space to do that and to explore that. I think it's important to walk in other people's shoes to understand who and what and how they've become what they are. And so I really took the time to kind of craft that.
Wow, man, that's impressive, man. Wow. Yeah, I'm impressed, man. Congratulations. That's something.
Thank you.
So your game is mostly, you have like an educational purpose behind that, right?
Yeah. So it's kind of cool. Like all the killers have, I don't have any of the cards next to me. They're across the room, but all of the killers have little bios on the back of the cards. Okay. So we put a lot of that information, and this is really crazy to me. I didn't expect this to happen, but I put out the game and I really thought it was going to be kind of an underground thing that maybe it'd be popular and all the crazy, freaky people would love it. What ended up happening, which was unexpected, was that now it's currently being used in a couple college campuses to help train in some of their psychology courses. They use it to display and to help people understand and identify different killers and their psychology. I have a school district up in Wisconsin that wants to carry it for their true crime classes in their high school. And then this was wild, man. I was at a show one time because I do a lot of conventions. I'm all over the place, all over the country. And so I was at a convention and a girl comes up to me and she says, "You're not going to believe what I do." She was like, I'm surprised I haven't heard of you. And I'm thinking, well, I mean, I get around, so maybe you've heard of me. She's like, yeah, I'm surprised, but you won't believe this. I work for the Department of Homeland Security. And I was like, oh shit, I'm glad you haven't heard of me. Like, I don't want you to know me. And she laughed and she said, "It's not like that, Jeff. It's not like that." She said, "I work for the Human Trafficking Division." I said, "I'm really, really glad that you haven't heard of me. Like, I don't want to be on the Diddy list. Like, you could keep me off of that list." So she comes up. She's like, "Oh my God, I love this." So she goes and she calls her lieutenant. And they end up buying a copy of Killers, a card game. I think they bought an expansion or two. And they're currently using it in training for their staff down in Louisiana in the office. There's about 12 of them down there that are constantly working on, different psychologies and things for all of these killers and working on all that stuff. So they use the game down there now. And I was like, this is wild. They called me up about, I don't know, 6-7 months ago, and they had me donate a bunch of stuff for the Louisiana Homicide Investigators Symposium. So like my shit was the door prize for the homicide investigators.
Wow, man. That's impressive.
How does that happen?
It's wild. Wow. And what about your book? You're also a
Yeah.
writer, right? Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about that.
So I've always wanted to write. I actually, as a kid, I'm a huge Stephen King fan, and I grew up reading Stephen King. Um, the first book that I ever liked that I read, I started reading it when I was about 6, 7 years old, and I loved it. I've read that book over 100 times throughout my lifetime. It is my absolute favorite novel. But when I was a kid, I started writing, and basically, I was like ripping off of Stephen King, right? I write short stories and stuff, and they were basically just regurgitating shit that I read that he wrote. They're terrible. Matter of fact, not too long ago, I found one of my early stories, and I was like, God, this is bad. but but anyway, so coming full circle, I decided, all right, I have all this stuff going on. I've done the game. I've got 6 different games to my record now. I've produced a bunch of different games of
Wow.
different modalities, and I was like, I'm now doing these talks. So I go around to conventions too, and I do talks on serial killer psychology. So I'll do like 3 or 4 of those a month sometimes. And I was like, all right, what's the next logical progression in all of this? Because I'm not a guy that, like, I don't have a degree in psychology. I don't have a degree in criminal justice, even though I've worked in the field, even though I've done a bunch of psychology and a lot of counseling. Um, you know, I was like, how do I position myself to get credibility in the industry? And I was fortunate enough early on to get a lot of people that gave me instant credibility. I became friends early on with John Borowski, who does a bunch of like serial killer documentaries and stuff. Matter of fact, he's done pretty much all the big ones. He did an H.H. Holmes documentary, an Albert Fish, Carl Panzeram, and he just released his Gacy Gacy miniseries, which are incredible. But he is the one that really brought me in. And when he brought me into the industry, he really gave me a platform. And I can never thank John enough. Like, he really put me on the map. He's an incredible guy. And I always have appreciated that. Him and Steve Gianangelo. Now, Steve actually, like, literally wrote the book on the psychology of the serial murderer. Incredibly intelligent guy, a professor, former law enforcement, but he's a professor at I believe, the University of Illinois. And so those two are the ones that really brought me in. What they didn't realize is I had a background in public speaking, and that I had like all of this other knowledge. And so they brought me in, and they're like, "Oh my God, like, you can speak, Jeff." I was like, "Yeah, I guess I can," even though I'm sitting here like in my serial killer garb. It was not a good look, but anyway. So long story short, with all of that, I decided that, the best way to gain some credibility is to write a book. So I was like, well, what do I do? How do I write this? Because I don't want to cover the same old shit that everybody else is covering. Like, I don't want to go down that same path. I could write a book about any number of all of these serial killers, but that's been done. I
Sure.
want to take it from a different angle. And one of the things that I've always believed is that, at least here in the United States, the majority of people have lost a lot of their critical thinking skills. They don't think for themselves. They listen to the talking heads and they believe whatever they say. They watch the documentaries and they think that that is gospel. And I was like, all right, how do I present true crime holistically?
Mhm.
Because often when we talk about true crime, people think of Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Eileen Wuornos, and that's it. They don't understand that true crime encompasses everything. It encompasses anything that happened in the real world and is actually crime. So, like, if I go to the grocery store tonight and I steal a bunch of shit at the grocery store, technically that's true crime. And so I wanted to like expose that a little bit. So my book is called Beyond the Headlines: True Crimes, Myths, and Legends. So I wanted to cover, like, I started out with serial killers because that's what people are familiar with. So I cover 10 different serial killers. I do a brief history of them, and then I do 3 myths and a legend about each one. Now, what happens, a lot of these people, because they're infamous, all this legendary stuff comes up about and around them. And I wanted to kind of dispel that, but I wanted to do it in an ambiguous way. I didn't want to give people answers. I didn't want it to be an answer book where I'm just answering questions. I wanted it to be an information book where people now have to go and they have to research for themselves. They have to dig in a little bit deeper so that they can really understand these cases and they can make a decision for themselves. So like one of the subtexts of the book is welcome to the deep, because I want people to jump into the deep end of the pool with me. So yeah, that was kind of the origins of the book. Volume 1 is out. Wild Blue Press is my publisher. I was fortunate enough to pick up a publisher out of the gate. It went and hit #1 on Amazon for a whole 8 hours. I did get a screenshot, and so I made sure that I could prove that shit. But it did hit there. I was excited, but yeah, we got it up there, and I'm currently working on Volume 2 on criminals. Volume 3 is on cults and religions. Volume 4 will be on assassinations, and Volume 5 will be on conspiracy theories. So that's where we're at right now.
Wow, that's impressive, man. Guys, go read the book of Jeff, please. It's gonna be interesting. That makes a difference. It's really cool what you just said. So if we go to Delphi.
Uh-oh. I don't know if I froze or you guys froze.
Do you hear me?
Oh, there you go. You're back. Yeah. I was like,
sorry, man.
I don't know who
My
froze
connection
here.
is crap. So how can we buy the book? By Amazon?
Yeah, you can go. Oh, goodness. You can go onto Amazon. You can pick it up there. It's there available. You can also, if you want a signed copy, you can go to scorpionlairgames.com and I have them there. I'll sign it and ship it out to you. So yeah, either one.
Cool, man. Cool. So let's talk about Delphi, Jeff. Tell us, how did you become interested in Delphi, in the Delphi's case?
So I heard about Delphi early on. Of course, True Crime Garage was like one of the first people that kind of jumped in on the case. They're also here in Ohio. I believe they're up in the Columbus area. I'm down in Cincinnati, so I'm a little bit south than them. But I remember listening to an episode that they had, and I'm also not that far away from Delphi. I'm like 2.5 hours from Delphi proper. So I was, when it came up and I heard about these 2 little girls that had been killed, I was always interested in the case. For the years that it kind of went cold, you know, I didn't even pay attention to it all that much. I knew that it was happening. I knew that they were busy doing investigation. I also knew that they hadn't really gotten any leads at all. So it kind of went dormant for a while. For at least 4 or 5 years, there was very little that actually came out. There was a lot of theories. Down the Hill podcast had come out, and they were trying to keep it alive and kind of keep looking at the narrative and find out what was going on. So I followed some of what they were talking about that I thought was really interesting. But when it came back up and they finally arrested Richard Allen, I ended up like right in the middle of a bunch of that stuff. And so I was instantly right back on the boat. And so not that this should color my opinion, because it really doesn't. Because if it was the opposite, it wouldn't make any difference. I guess everybody knows what I think already anyway. But I've been friends with Bob Motta Jr. for several years now. Him and I were at a convention together several years ago called Dark History Con in Champaign, Illinois. And we got to hanging out and everything. And I was pretty close with him and following all the work that he did with Gacy. And his dad was Gacy's defense attorney. So I was kind of in the background having a lot of conversations as they were investigating all that after he had put out the Gacy tapes volume 1. And so we had become pretty close during that time. And so he's moved on from that and really gotten involved in a lot of stuff. I mean, he is everywhere. And one of the trials that he was really focusing on was the Delphi case. So when he really started focusing on that, I jumped back in listening to that. One of the things I appreciate about Bob on Defense Diaries is they really tried to stay out of like all the conjecture. Like Bob would read the court documents, right? And he would go through line by line by line of the Franks memo, all of the different memorandums, all of the different motions that were being brought up. And he would read the official court proceedings. That to me was really important because it's a very impartial way to look at it. You know, all this other bullshit and all this conspiracy and all that stuff. What I really needed to understand at that time is what's going on in the court. Like, what are they filing right now? What does this mean for the defense, for the prosecution? How is this going to influence the trial when the trial comes? So I really appreciated the way that he did that versus other people, because it was very ambiguous. He was not saying, you know, this is what we think. We think all of this is bullshit, even though he would say that, like he disagreed because he's a defense guy. And but he's very honest about that. Like, hey, you know, if I think he's guilty, I would say that he's guilty. Do I think their PCA is garbage? Absolutely. And we found out through the court case that it was garbage, that they really had nothing. And it's amazing that they got a conviction. I was listening to Murder Sheet today, and I was listening to the juror. Somebody had commented that. I was listening to that one juror that has come out, and they did an interview with her. And it was interesting to me that, and I did a whole bunch of notes because I'm going to do another Delphi video now on all of that stuff. And so it was interesting to me that she said that really the only thing that really pushed her to believing that it was Alan is that the Voorhees testimony that she saw him on the bridge and he saw her. I got to tell you, like, if that is what pushed you to convicting Richard Allen, the reason why they did that is because they didn't have any other evidence and they didn't have any other suspects that they could even look at. And I have a huge problem with that because, you know, all this stuff about there wasn't a nexus and all the shit that Jerry Holman is talking is just, it's like, okay, but they needed to have something other than just Allen to look at. If they convicted Allen with all the information and all the cards on the table, then they convict Richard Allen. They believe that it's him, but they had no other information. They said that they didn't even know about any of that stuff until after the trial. And it's like, how do you do that? You literally curated that trial to only convict one person. And you wouldn't allow the defense to even give any other alternatives. So it's like they really hamstrung the defense to not being able to do anything else. And that juror actually said something to that effect. She didn't say it, but she said, okay, the defense seemed like they were having a hard time, that they may have not been as ready for this, well, that's because they're constantly saying, okay, well, our defense is a third party theory, but we can't say anything about a third party. So how do we defend this guy? How do we say, hey, it wasn't him, it was these people over here, if we're not allowed to talk about that? We're not allowed to talk about Odinism. We're not allowed to talk about anybody else other. Yeah, it's so crazy that they weren't even allowed to get in the confessions of other people. They couldn't get in the sketches that clearly identified other people on the bridge. It's so crazy.
Yeah, right, man. I agree with you. I never understood why, for example, at least the clients, the nexus was there, man. And we can say the same for, I don't know, Brad Holder, even Brad Weber. At least give the tools to the defense to be able to defend your client. You know,
Absolutely.
If you have a solid case stating that there is only one guy committing this crime, which to me is just crazy.
Yeah, it's impossible.
Allow the defense to have those tools to at least to be able to defend the client and to have more transparency here in this in this case because lack of transparency was all around here, man. I don't know what do you think about that?
So I have literally right here next to me. This is the Franks memo, right? All 136 pages. I've read through it a bunch of different times. Uh, I listened to the interview, the first interview with Jerry Holman. He's done several since then, but I listened to the first one that he did with Hidden True Crime, and I listened to him talk about that. And he says that it was all lies. I read through that Frank's memo, and there was very, very little speculation in there. Right? It was very cut and dry, and all of it was taken directly from the three police that were on the FBI task force, right? Kevin Murphy, Ferenczi, and Todd Click. And so, they took it all directly from there. How do you go? And these are the guys that were on your side, right? These are the guys that were doing the investigation for you. And so I have a hard time when now Jerry Holman goes and says, well, I was there doing that investigation too. I was there actively looking into that. But we found nothing that could even be helpful and that even pointed any fingers at these other people. I'm like, clearly you didn't read any of the stuff that Todd Click and them wrote, because what they wrote was damning. And, the fact that Todd Click went and got his own counsel to sue them is really telling. That, and the fact that they put him in jail a week before the trial is pretty telling that they were trying to get rid of him. So, I try not to go down the conspiracy thing, but it's awful hard in this one. It's real hard to not go that route when they do things that seem so conspiratorial. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
I understand your point. To me, the Odinism angle, and I respect your opinion, but that angle to me is a little bit unlikely. We can agree to disagree, but the angle that really bothers me in this case is the clients. I cannot understand how the clients are not connected here in this murder. Uh, and when we say that there was only one actor, one perpetrator, there are a lot of questions that remains unsolved. Let's talk about the lack of defensive injuries. How can you explain that only one perpetrator, one killer, is able to murder those two girls and they don't have one single defensive injury? It's crazy, man. That's impossible. They
Yeah.
need to have cuts in the hands, broken nails, broken fingers. It doesn't add up. Lack of defensive injuries is just it blows my mind, man.
Well,
You need
here,
to have more than one killer there.
yeah. Well, here's the thing. It's not possible to control two teenage girls. Like, and they talk about, well, he had a gun. Yeah, but you can't hold a gun while you're slitting somebody's throat with a knife. Like, it's not possible. You can't hold the gun on somebody while you're slitting the throat. The other person, just by natural, uh, you know, process, is going to take off running. And they
You know,
proved that none of the victims were bound. Right? There was no residue. There were no ligature marks. So how do you have these girls that were not drugged? They weren't bound in any way that, or restrained in any way that we can tell, that they didn't just get up and run away while he's doing whatever he's doing with the other one. So, like, the whole single person theory is crazy. And I will tell you that I don't know about the whole Odinism thing either. I mean, I'm not far off from what you think. I don't necessarily think that it was, this whole ritualistic thing necessarily. I think it was probably the people that did it. I think that it is more likely that they did it because they were racist. And that whole when the one guy's, I think it was Elvis Fields' sister, says that the reason why they did it was because she was dating, the mother was dating black men or whatever. I think maybe that's closer to the truth. that there was definitely this angle where these guys were not okay with that. And of course, we know that that his son was dating Abby. So it's like, that's a fair thing. I also happen to believe, and this is my own assertion, when Jerry Holman talks about that they may have gone there to meet somebody, I think they probably were. I think maybe they were going there to meet the son, and they ended up being there. And I would think personally that if you got there and you knew the people down the hill, you might go down there a little bit more willingly, because it doesn't seem like during that part they struggled. Like, it wasn't like they were thrown down the hill. So, maybe they knew the people at the bottom of the hill, and it happened to be these guys that they were already acquainted with, that were family members of the boy that she was dating.
Yeah. Or the other angle, which is my personal opinion as well, is that they were to meet Anthony Schultz, and Anthony Schultz, we have this connection to Keegan Klein and Tony Klein. What is really weird to me is, that law enforcement, they stated that the search of the Wabash River was a direct consequence of the interrogatory of Keegan Klein at the Grissom Air Force Base. And it happens that right after the search of the Wabash River, we have the arrest of Richard Allen. So it cannot be a coincidence there, man. So Keegan Klein, he made a confession. They go to search the Wabash River because Keegan was confessing. And right after that, they arrest Richard Allen. And it happens that that guy who was confessing is the one who created the Anthony Schultz account, and there is no nexus. I cannot understand that, man. Nexus is there. It's bullshit when we listen to no nexus. No nexus, my ass. Really, it makes me mad, that, man.
Well, and you wonder, why is that, right? Why would they not want to point the finger that way? There's got to be something else there that we're not seeing. Because when Jerry Holman sits there and he talks about, the only possible person that they could point the finger at and that they had enough evidence on was Richard Allen. Where was that evidence? Like, I don't see it.
They didn't have it. They had to put Richard Allen in the Westville Correctional Facility to get a confession because they didn't have any evidence. So that was the strategy of the prosecution. Let's put this guy in that correctional facility because we need that confession. Without confession, we have nothing. And what is the credibility of those confessions, knowing what Dr. Walla did? That psychologist is a disgrace of her profession.
So, what's interesting there is the juror said that the confessions weren't a huge weight on the conviction. And I thought that was really interesting, that was not a huge factor, because they believed that the confessions were, he was under psychosis. So the defense proved that he was dealing with some serious mental stuff. So they didn't really use, and of course this is one juror's opinion. So, the other 11 jurors may have had a very different opinion of that, but this was that one juror. And if that is really the case, that all of the jurors didn't really put a lot of stock in the confessions, how in the world do you convict this guy? I don't know how there's no reasonable doubt when you take away the confessions. Like, it just seems to me that it screams that you cannot convict this guy of 130 years because there is so much doubt. They even said, and Shane, they talked about, or the juror talked about the bullet evidence, and she said that wasn't really part of the conviction either, that they thought that was junk science.
They didn't buy that. The jurors, they didn't buy that theory. The bullet evidence was not part of the, it was not a heavy factor for the decision.
Yeah. Like, that just, it blew my mind that was the inside of the jury, and that's how they felt. and they still convicted Allen. I can't even conceive, because when I looked at it and I heard all of and of course, we're all looking at this secondhand because we're not in the courtroom. We're not hearing all the testimony firsthand. We're hearing it from other people. So it's like, but when I heard all of that, even listening to both sides, I was like, there's no way that they can convict this guy. Like there's no way. It's got to be a hung jury or not guilty. Right. And so when they were like guilty on all counts, I was like, this is unbelievable. Like, what in the hell is going on? Yeah. Oh, that was you that just put that.
Yeah, I was answering to Shane, who is one of my favorite viewers here, man. Yeah, no, that was crazy. And don't get me wrong, Jeff. And I respect your theories, and we are here to talk. I think that Richard Allen is involved in the crime. I just think that there is not enough evidence to convict him,
Yeah.
convict for the conviction, let's say. And to me, again, the clients are involved. Uh, what do you think about the crime scene, the signatures? Do you think there are signatures? What do you think about the sticks? Uh, what are your thoughts about that?
I listened to the interview that the Murder Sheet did with Cicero today. Actually, I did it. I listened to it
Great
about an hour
interview.
or so ago. Yeah.
I love that guy.
He's a very honest guy.
Yeah.
I think there are several things that he's honestly wrong about, but he seems like a very nice guy. I think he really wants to get the information out there.
100%.
But the whole idea that the sticks were there as covering is ridiculous. Like,
100%.
I got to tell you, to put one or two sticks on somebody to cover them is so ludicrous. Like, if I'm going to cover a body, right? I try to think about this. If I'm going to go out there and murder somebody, if I'm trying to cover up a body and I'm not digging a hole, I'm going to put more than sticks on them. Maybe I'm going to bring like I don't know, maybe bring like a at least like something like a bag or something to put over the body. Like it's the middle of, this is February, right? So there's no leaves on the trees. So you're not going to use anything to cover these bodies up. Like,
No,
what? Like, how?
no. It's evident that there was not an attempt to conceal the body, and you know, to me, it's clear that there was a clear pattern there, some kind of shape. I don't know, but remember that the sticks were cut. So you
Yeah.
have this killer. He's running out of time. Oh, I have to hide those bodies. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut some sticks and then I'm gonna try to hide the bodies. It's ridiculous, man. It
Yeah, it's
doesn't make sense.
ridiculous.
It's,
Well, the same thing. You have, if you believe the prosecution's timeline, Richard Allen only had less than an hour and a half to complete all of the stuff that he did there, right? If he did it by himself. You've got this guy that's got to kill these two girls. He's got to possibly try to sexually assault them. He's got to cut all these sticks, right? He's got to dress one of them, undress both of them. And like, to me, with someone who is, at least as far as we know, has never done this before, right? This is not something that you go and you just do and it's like completely natural to you and you're going to like do everything right. The fact that his DNA was not there, and of course Cicero talks about that and how it's normal for there to be no touch DNA at a scene, I think is ridiculous. It actually seems to me that it's the complete opposite. We often find at crime scenes the trace DNA evidence is so plentiful that it's almost now, if there's none there, you got to wonder what the hell is going on. So, the fact that this guy, and if you look at Richard Allen himself, this is not a guy that's going to go out there with gloves and a hazmat suit on, right? So, the fact that we didn't get anything from him is crazy to me. So, yeah, I don't know. He talked about how, you know, it could be the uh, the blood on the tree could be from transfer. Uh, you know,
I think that's the case. Actually,
yeah.
I think that's the case.
One of the things that he said that surprised me that I didn't know before is he said that there was more than one transfer stain on that tree. Now that nobody talked about. So if that is the case, it was probably transfer, right? Because, you know, if there's a bunch of marks on there from somebody touching the tree or whatever that has blood on their hands, then it probably was that. But yeah, the sticks are crazy. The whole uh
We have
all right.
Steve from
Yeah.
True Crime Web, great podcaster. I don't know if you know about Steve from True Crime Web. He's great, and he made a couple of experiments trying
Oh,
to
nice.
reproduce the crime scene situation. And I remember that before the statement of Patrick Cicero, Steve, he made experiment with putting his hand on the tree, trying to replicate the sign, the inverted L or the F, and actually he
Yeah.
was able to do that. When I heard the testimony of Patrick Cicero, was almost the same experiment made by Steve. That was great, and he was also doing experiments placing sticks on the bodies of some mannequins, let's say. So he's great.
Yeah.
Uh,
So here,
Another thing related to the sticks, which is really weird. If you see the crime scene pictures, you have sticks placed above the throats of the girls. This is really interesting. It talks about the psychological aspect of the murder. It's something's weird there, man. In my opinion.
and one of the things that really like was really telling to me, and I don't know how you get around this. It's really hard for me to understand this, but I think it was Elvis Fields again that had confessed that he was the one that put the sticks in the hair. And he put the sticks in Abby's hair uh, basically because they felt like she was a nasty girl or whatever.
A
And
troublemaker. A
yeah,
troublemaker.
troublemaker was what he said. So it's like I just don't understand how that is not something that you 110% have to figure out, like if this guy was there. Who else would have known that? That interview was done early on, right? So, you know, you're talking 2017, 2018, and he says that to his sister. His sister was then interviewed. I'm not sure if she's the one that took the lie detector test or not and passed it. But regardless of that, if that information is out there floating around, how do you say that? And Shane said that there are no antlers.
In the crime scene, I see we are not talking about sticks, but there are like two. How can you call it? Like twigs. I don't know what's
Yeah,
the name. Like small branches, mini branches. Could be something random that was already in the on the grass, maybe. Who
but
knows?
had but
According to Holman, he said that he went. I was listening to an interview made by Gray Hughes yesterday, I think, and Holman said that he went to talk to Elvis Fields, and he was able to conclude that Elvis was not in Delphi at the time of the murders. That's what he said in his
well,
interview yesterday.
so the reason why they say that is because Elvis Fields' roommate said that the three of them, him, Elvis, and another guy, were visiting someone in another part of Indiana because they were in the hospital. And as far as I know, they never followed up with that. They just took his word for it. They never followed up and said, "Hey, were you actually there?" Now, maybe if they went and this guy was actually at the hospital and they went to the hospital and got some footage from the hospital, because last time I checked, there's plenty of cameras in hospitals they could go back and, now they're not going to be able to, but back then they could have went back and looked to see if Elvis Fields was in fact at the hospital that day.
Hmm.
Because like I'm here in Cincinnati and I work full time for Cintas and we deliver to the hospitals. I was at a hospital 2 or 3 weeks ago and somebody had walked out with a baby, right? And so they had stationed people at all the exits and they were viewing all the cameras to find out what happened. It ended up just being something very simple, very innocuous, which happens a lot, apparently, from what I'm told. But they had all the cameras. They could look and review and see who walked where and what they had. It seems like it would be very, very simple to clear somebody and say, hey, Elvis Fields could not have been in Delphi that day because he was, in fact, at a hospital somewhere else in the state. The fact that they didn't even bother to do that tells me more than the fact that they're not saying anything about it.
They didn't bother to do a lot of stuff. The investigation was crap. I
Yeah.
remember the crime scene investigator testifying that they didn't recover the sticks because they were elements of not evidentiary value. I was I was what? How can a crime scene investigator say something that stupid, man? And then we don't have DNA. They were not even collecting the sticks at the right moment. It's freaking crazy.
Yeah.
Sometimes here just makes me mad. And
Yeah.
again, I think Richard Allen is involved. That's my personal opinion. But the investigation was so crap, and there is a reasonable doubt, in my opinion. What do you think about the phone being found under Abby's body, under the shoe of one of the girls? That was kind of weird. What's your take about that?
Yeah. That is something. It's a mystery. I think it's really interesting. Uh, how did that get there? Did she actually put it there to hide it? That's what they suppose. But that is if you believe the state's timeline, right? The defense was not able to really even provide a timeline because all of that timeline involves third party. So they were like, they had a really, really hard time. And I think this is where the jurors had a hard time connecting the dots for the defense because there's so much evidence and so many things that they could not even discuss. It makes it really hard when they're talking about, hey, there was something inserted into the port, into the headphone jack at 5:22 and then was taken out at 10:24 or whatever. How is that possible? It's not possible. The theory that they came up with, they Google searched it, which is incredible to me. They Google searched it that it could have been, water damage or it could have been dirt. The problem is, how do you have dirt that goes in there at 5:22 when the phone hasn't moved? And they prove that, and then the dirt falls out at 10 o'clock or 10:30 or whatever. That to me is hard to understand. It's also hard to understand that when they did the initial search, that they also searched that area, but nobody found the bodies there. The gentleman that was there in that area searching the banks said that they had it all lit up, that they had floodlights out there, and you could see the whole ground. So how did they not find the bodies then, the night of the 13th? And they didn't find the bodies until the 14th. Were the bodies even there? Now, that's a real question that I have, and nobody's adequately explained that up until this point, which really throws a wrench into the prosecution's timeline because they're saying that the girls had to be killed right around 3 o'clock or so, and then Alan was out of there by 3:30. So if the bodies were there all day, the rest of the day into the night when they're all out there searching, how did nobody run across those bodies? They weren't far from the bridge and they had lights out there. So
And
like that's a
they didn't find any clothes on the river that night.
yeah. So
It's weird. I agree with you. We tend to minimize some relevant questions just to accept that Richard Allen was the only murderer here, and that water damage explanation. I think that prosecution they didn't go deep to explain that.
no,
And yes, we have a lot of YouTubers giving their opinions, but I would like to have an expert in cell phones explaining what is the most likely explanation for that. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Well,
I
here's the
just
thing. Here's the thing about that. They had this phone for 7 years. How the hell did they not check the phone for water damage? How do you not know that? 7 years you've been downloading and trying to get stuff off of this phone, and nobody looked to see if there was water damage on this phone. You had to Google search it at the trial. What? Like it's so ludicrous. If there was water damage on this phone, they would have had it the day that they got the phone. It would have been one of the first things in the report because they would have had a hard time pulling data from a phone that's water damaged. They would have had to do all kinds of things to get that data off of there. The fact that they didn't have to do that and they never mention it at all prior to that is really telling that there was no water damage on this phone. Whatever they did crossing the river or whatever. Now, then that still brings up the question, how the hell did the phone get there? Even if you're looking at the defense side of this and it happened in a different order or the bodies weren't there, who goes there and deposits the bodies and puts the phone there? Why would you do that? Why would you leave
yeah.
the
And
phone?
if I'm the killer, my first reflex is to throw the cell phone into the river.
Absolutely. That
Yeah,
that
that
phone is going to be long gone.
exactly. One of the coming back to the fact that there were no defensive injuries, which is one of the big factors here in this case, in my opinion, and no one is talking about that. I remember that Steve from True Crime Web, he did a long show talking about that and how does that situation blows his mind. But we can add to that. Remember that when Cicero was giving his testimony, he was talking about the blood flow going from the neck toward the face, not
Yeah.
toward the chest.
Yeah.
So that means that the girls were like in an inverted vertical position when they were being killed. So there are some questions that, man, I cannot understand. How can we say that there was only one killer here in this case?
Yeah.
It's just
Absolutely.
blows my mind.
And I agree with you. Richard Allen may have been there. He may have been involved. But I can't imagine any way, shape, or form that he was the only one there and the only one involved. There had to be more people. I can't conceive of well, one of the things, and of course they were never able to enter this in because they didn't talk about they didn't talk about any of the stuff that Brad Holder had, and the fact that like 3 days after the murders happened, he posts a picture that he did, a drawing of someone hanging upside down in a very similar position to how the girls were laid on the ground. To me, that is significant. It's significant that he had images on his Facebook that were nearly identical to the crime scene. And like, how do you get that information? And how do we say that they didn't have, even if they weren't there, even if they do have alibis, that they weren't culpable in this crime? At that point, these crime scene photos were not released, right? Nobody knew what the crime scene looked like. But these guys had some idea of what this crime scene looked like, talked about it, confessed to possibly spitting on one of the girls. And the bullshit response that Jerry Holman had about, well, he was saying that he wondered if somebody could pick it up and then deposit it at the crime scene. Well, here's the thing. Why the hell would somebody do that if you had nothing to do with it? Like, who's going to say some guy an hour away, you're going to go to his house or go somewhere where he's at, collect his spit and deposit it at a crime scene, but he had nothing to do with it? Like, who does that? Like, it seems very, very strange and very, very far-fetched to say that that's the reason why you excluded a guy.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. They had some type of information, as you said. Even if they didn't commit the crime, they had some information about it because, as you said, the picture of that Brad Holder posted in Facebook, mimicking the crime scene. Elvis Fields talking about the twigs above Abby's head. Yeah, they knew something. I'm not saying it was a ritualistic crime, they committed the crime, but somehow they had some type of information, in my opinion. And the weird thing is that the interviews that were made to Brad Holder, they don't exist. They
Yep.
disappeared. 70
Disappeared
years,
altogether.
almost 3 days of interviews, magic. Another thing we minimize here in this case, shit happens, mistakes, small town, they are not used to deal with this type of crime. Minimization. The sticks were items of not evidentiary value. Poor guys, we cannot minimize that type of
Yeah.
stuff, man. Makes me really mad.
Here's one thing that I picked up when I was listening to the juror today. And this was something I was surprised that ran through my head. She talked about how it was really frustrating and the jury was really upset about the technical difficulties that they had at the trial when they were trying to play the videos and the problems that they were having with the TV monitor. Now, Jerry Holman, in his interview, mentioned how there are always technical difficulties, right? In any investigation, there are a number and multitudes of technical difficulties. And I got to tell you, the way that he said it and the way that she said it made me think that they did that shit on purpose at the trial, and it influenced the jury because a lot of their mistakes in this trial that the defense was trying to push forward, like that this wasn't there, this disappeared, that wasn't recorded, were all predicated on the fact that that there were mistakes and that the technology was not working properly. And then they illustrated that at the trial by having the TV not work and not getting it right and not connecting the wires or whatever. And I'm like, man, this seems like they were trying to influence somebody to think, oh, exactly, this shit happens all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that seemed real strange to me.
Another coincidence. And what about the clerical mistake regarding Dan Doolin?
Oh my God, yeah, that is unbelievable. That the name just gets misadded. It's Richard Allen Whiteman. I'm like, how does somebody enter that in incorrectly? Maybe some late nights. I don't know. Too much drinking on the job. I don't know.
But the type of explanations the prosecution side is trying to give for that clerical mistake. Maybe they put the tip in the wrong box. Stuff like that. Like, come on, guys. For real? Are you for real? It's unacceptable. Unacceptable, man.
Yeah, it's this whole they want to be they're Mayberry, right? They just we don't live in the 21st century anymore. Exactly. You just do, it's like the 1960s. Unbelievable.
No, man. But let's talk about the other side. One thing that really bothers me a lot is the lack of alibi. Why don't we have an alibi for Richard Allen? That's the easiest way to get out of trouble. And we don't know what at least I don't know what's his alibi. What do you think about that?
So I think one of the things that I think is interesting about this is that you have a guy, and they really made a big stink about this. But Alan, a couple days after the murders happen, he's the one that calls in, right? And he's the one that places himself at the scene. To me, if I were going to commit a crime and I was going to do something like that, I sure as hell wouldn't call the police. Like, even if I was there, right? Uh, I sure wouldn't let them know that I was there. So, like, the whole idea that, he placed himself there and, all of this stuff, well, to me, it seems more likely that he did that because he was trying to be a helpful citizen. And that was dumb as shit, because the only reason why they even started looking at him again is because he made that phone call, right? So to me, that is less of a problem than a lot of other things, a lot of other theories that are out there. But the fact
But
that he doesn't,
we can see that in the other way as well. Maybe he was
yeah,
pretending to be innocent. I went to talk to the police, so it's not me, Maybe he was playing games as well
well,
with
I got to
law
tell you,
enforcement.
if he did that, he's not watched enough TV,
For
because that
sure.
is that is always a bad idea. You don't volunteer information.
Talking about bad ideas. What about the box cutter? If you are going to plan a murder, if your intention is to go to kill two little girls or one little girls, I understand that you're gonna have a gun, maybe a knife, but you're not gonna have a box cutter to kill two people. That's another bad
Uh,
idea here. There's a lot
yeah,
of things that just uh, don't add up, man. That doesn't make sense. But
yeah, yeah.
anyways,
Well, and the one big thing that they talked about, and they really made it a big deal at the trial, was the white van. And the fact that they said that, this was not information that was available. But everybody and their brother was talking about the white van like a year after the murders happened, before Richard Allen was even in the picture.
sure,
So the fact that they convinced the jury that the white van was brand new information and there was no possible way that Richard Allen could have known about the white van is, again, ridiculous. And the fact that we also know that Monica Walla probably fed him a shit ton of information. She is probably the reason why Richard Allen knew anything that was outside of the discovery, because we also know that Allen had the discovery at the time he was making the confessions, right? So he had read a bunch of the stuff that the prosecution had on him. So
right.
yeah,
And actually, he didn't say, according to Walla, he didn't say white van. He said just van, which
a
is even
van,
worse.
yeah, yeah,
But and I agree with you. I posted a video of one great YouTuber who is already deceased. His name is Michael Catt. And 6 years ago, he was talking about the van of Brad Weber. And
yeah,
his theory, if you check that video, his theory was like a replica of the Richard Allen's confession. So that's true. The whole van situation and the Brad Weber's information was out there since forever.
yeah,
So the credibility of that confessions is on the table. The confession was not recorded, videotaped. The psychologist, Dr. Wallace, she destroyed the notes. So there's something fishy there.
yeah. That was one of the things. I listened to Defense Diaries when they interviewed OJ, and she talked about that. She talked about the fact that in Westville, the only time Richard Allen was not videotaped was when he was in the meetings with Walla. That seems really, really strange to me. The fact that you're supposed to have client attorney privilege, that those conversations are supposed to be private, along with the conversations that are going on with your medical health professional, right? Even though in a prison setting that's not the case. They can record those, and they should record those for the safety of the people involved, right? When you have somebody in there. Now with Allen, I don't know if when Walla was doing the interviews and stuff, because he was in a cage, they had brought him out there in that cage, if she was in the cage with him or outside the cage. Maybe they didn't need that. But a lot of times, I worked in a prison, right? That they would videotape a bunch of that stuff. Now, why wasn't that videotaped? It's crazy. It's not a good look on what they were doing in Westville for the prosecution when there is so much information and so much supporting detail for their side of the case that is unrecorded, and we just have to take somebody's word for it.
Yeah. One thing that surprised me a lot, and we are talking here, we are discussing with the information we have. Of course, we were not there. We didn't see any video. We didn't hear anything. So we try to make sense with the information we have right now. But I was really surprised today when I was listening to the interview made by the murder sheet to the juror, and she said that she was not impressed with the conditions of Richard Allen in Westville facility. That for her it was not that bad, and we always have that idea that he was treated really bad in that correctional facility. So I wish I could see those videos to make like to give my opinion about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know what was really interesting to me when Defense Diaries interviewed Baldwin and Rosie, they both said that the majority of the corrections officers in Westville were very, very nice. That they did a really good job, that they were trying to do the best that they could. And I was really surprised about that, because there was all this talk on all the interwebs and all the podcasts about how horribly he was treated. And, we heard all the stuff about the Odinist prison guards and how terrible they were. And they were saying things, and, that they were trying to do all of these things to him. And, when Baldwin and Rosie came out and said that seemed like completely counter to what I had heard previous to that. And it really surprised me. But then when you find out from the juror who watched those videos and seen it firsthand, that she also felt that way. She felt that it wasn't nearly as bad. I thought it was interesting when she talked about the wheelchair kind of thing that he was riding, or that they had. That's a restraint chair. That shit is no fun. Like I said, I worked in a prison. We had plenty of restraint chairs. When you get put in one of those, it is not a good day. That is bad, bad stuff.
Yeah, 100%, man. There's a lot of stuff that I would love to watch with my eyes. The interview of Holman with Richard Allen. What really happened there? How did they interact one to each other? Was he really bullying Richard Allen? In my opinion, he looks like a bully. Now he pretends like to be like an angel when he goes on YouTube. Yeah. He's playing mind games, but whatever. And what about the ISP trooper Brian Harshman saying that there is no doubt that the Allen voice matches Bridge Guy, the down the hill? How can a guy like this? How can you allow to have that type of testimony in a process? They're influencing the jury, man, with that type of shit. Yep. He's not an expert in voice recognition.
Correct. Yeah, huh? And not to mention, all of it was I don't want to say doctored, but it was enhanced. So how do we know that any of the voices on there actually sound like the real people? Like it's not possible. When you run that stuff through filters and filters and filters to get the cleanest image, you're not going to retain the audio. Even in the original video, you can barely hear and understand what they're saying. So it's just so improbable that they can match the voices. Yeah, it's crazy. And then of course Harshman's not an expert, so what the hell does he know?
No, man, it's crazy. This case is just crazy. Do you think Richard Allen is gonna be allowed, or she's gonna be able to have an appeal here, or that's gonna be unlikely according to your experience?
I got to tell you, when I look at all the things that the defense are doing currently, it seems pretty likely that there's going to be an appeal.
Yeah,
Uh, so I think that there is so much stuff that was withheld from this trial. How do you not have an appeal? Because, and even if it doesn't go anywhere, and again, it may get to the appellate court and they may deny it. It may not get to a new trial. But there will definitely be things filed to the appellate court. I would find it really, really strange if they don't really look into this more, and that there's not a new trial. It's going to suck for the families that are involved because they're going to have to go through this again. But if that's the case, and the other people that may have been involved in this, there needs to be a spotlight on that because they should not be out there. If anybody else was involved in this, they need to go to prison too. And so I think that those avenues need to be looked at, that people need to really highlight that, because it's clear to me that it is not possible. I thought it was crazy that Jerry Holman, in that interview, he's like, well, I looked and I always thought that it could just be one guy. But then I thought I didn't want to leave out the possibility that it was more than one guy. But the more I looked at it, it had to be just that one guy. And I thought, you apparently didn't look at very much because it's not possible.
actually,
Oh man.
actually, the first interview he made after the process with Hidden True Crime, I think, the way he talked about the Anthony Shots account makes you think that the clients may be involved actually in this murder. He didn't want to develop that conversation because he knows that he's gonna mess with the appealing possibility. He doesn't want to give ammunition
Yeah.
to the defense. But to me, reading between lines, that was clear that they still think that the clients are involved. That's my personal opinion. And other
So
thing yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead because I
Yeah,
was gonna switch gears for a second anyway.
other thing that he said two times when they were asking him about the search of the Wabash River, he said, I cannot talk about that at this point. I cannot talk about that at this point. There's something there, man.
Yeah.
Again, I know I'm very repetitive about this, but you have Keegan Klein confessing, law enforcement going to the Wabash River search, 5 weeks, $1 million spent on that excursion or expedition. And then you have the arrest of Richard Allen. And the guy who made the confession is the one who created Anthony Shots, and there is no nexus. Come on. As you said, we are not in the prehistorical age.
What do you think about the fact that Ferenczi was killed?
Uh, I think it's hard to make a connection with Delphi, but who knows, man? I think the guy who killed Ferenczi was an Odinist guy.
And a
That's what I
former
understand.
prison and a former prison guard.
A former prison guard.
Yeah. So,
And remember that when Todd Click went to Delphi to talk to Holman, they put Brad Holder on the waiting room to intimidate Todd Click.
yeah.
So yeah, we can say that this is a conspiracy, but I think those guys, Murphy, Ferenczi, and Click, they were being bullied by
Oh,
the
for sure.
unified command for sure.
Yeah. Well, you figure Click gets arrested for unrelated things 7 days before the trial starts. 7 days after the Odinism report is turned in, Ferenczi is killed. There is a Molotov cocktail thrown into his office while he's sitting at his desk. He leaves the office. The guy shoots him in the head when he walks out the door. This is like crazy, crazy shit that's happening to these three guys. And now you have Kevin Murphy, who I actually asked. I was doing some research trying to figure out because two of the three guys, one is in jail, one is dead. What happened to Kevin Murphy? And so I asked Bob Mata, I said, hey, how's Kevin doing? Because I feel like he must have like decided to run and hide after all of his buddies were in deep shit over the report. Like one of them's dead now over this report that they submitted. He's got to be like running for cover and living underground somewhere. And so Bob told me that he is alive and well. So I don't know what that means, but I think we're going to eventually hear a lot more from Kevin Murphy
And you have
upcoming.
and you have Todd Click being arrested 12 days before the beginning of the process, which
Yeah.
I understand. If he did something wrong and he deserves to be in jail, fine. But the timing is very suspicious, man.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. There is a lot of things about this that seem very, very strange. And you got to wonder how they pulled all of these things together. The fact that it was interesting to me that the juror talked about and kind of sang the praises of Judge Gall. And of course, when you're watching all the interviews now, they cannot say anything bad or negative about Gall. But that behind the scenes, they're all talking about it because, when it comes down to it, the only person that you can really blame for 90% of the defense's case not even getting in front of the jurors is Judge Gall. So, how does that happen? They talk about how, well, she just did it to make the trial fair. Well, how do you make that fair when you don't allow them to put in anything else or even like the sketches or, who ever heard of that before, that the sketches are inadmissible into the trial? Like, when does that ever happen?
No, that's crazy, man. This case blows my mind. I was expecting to have a lot of answers after the process, but it seems to that we have more questions than answers.
For sure.
So yeah, man, and I know if someday we're gonna have the answers or not, and let's see if an appeal is gonna happen. Let's wait for that.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, I hope that it does. I hope that at some point people will actually be able to see, and the right people will actually be able to see the full story, because I think it's important. And I wholeheartedly believe that if you see all of the evidence and you still believe that it's Richard Allen and only Richard Allen, then he goes away forever. And that's perfectly fine if that is the case.
exactly.
But I believe that not looking at the evidence and just convicting a man on 10% of the evidence that's actually out there is completely wrong. And it is a very, very dangerous place for any one of us, because what do we do if that happens to us? Well, then you're fucked and you spend the rest of your life in jail. That's awful. That's an awful place to be.
Yeah, 100%, man. So I don't know if you have like a final conclusion, or what is your biggest I don't know, takeaway of this conversation or this case. What are you gonna do next in your channel about Delphi? What's coming for you?
So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do another video. We're going to kind of summarize all the different interviews that are out there, because now the gag order is off and everybody is out there talking, and there's all these sound bites that are out there. So I'm going to kind of pull some of that together. I've been taking notes, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm also going to talk about some of the other theories that are out there, because after I did my Delphi series, there were a bunch of theories that I had not heard before. And there were a bunch of conspiracy stuff that I really wanted to look into, because I just didn't know that they were there. And I'm curious to see what kind of legs they have. May not be anything, maybe something. So I want to look at that. I want to take a little bit of time to dig into some of that stuff. I know that there was somebody had mentioned to me that there were several other murders that happened about 15 minutes away from Delphi. That there was a fire that happened, and
Florida.
I had no idea about some of that stuff. So I really want to kind of dig into that, and of course Holman was involved in that as well. So I think it's an interesting thing. I think it'll be interesting to kind of dig in and look at it a little bit and see what I personally think. At this point, I don't know because I haven't had time to really look at that because I've been listening to all the interviews by everybody and their brother who is coming out and talking about the case. And I think it's really interesting to hear what they have to say because you know that the defense is really holding back because they're hoping for an appeal. That the people on the prosecution side are holding back because, like you said, they don't want to give them ammunition so that they can go for an appeal. So it's an interesting little game of cat and mouse right now that's being played with all of these different interviews that are happening, and you get little glimmers of the truth that's behind that when you listen to these people and what they're saying. So I'm fascinated to listen to that and then maybe expound on some of those things. But as far as the channel is concerned, I've got a whole bunch of things coming up outside of that. I just did an interview with oh my goodness, with Karen Conti just yesterday on Friday. That one's going to release in like a week and a half. If you
Cool.
don't know who Karen is, she was the last defense attorney for Gacy
Yeah.
during the death row appeals that he had. She has a very, very interesting perspective on John and who he was and how he acted and how manipulative he was. So we talk about a bunch about that. And a lot of what I do with my channel, again, kind of following the line of the book, is I want to talk about some of the theories that are maybe not as talked about out there. Not necessarily conspiratorial, but I want to talk about those things that are possible that we often don't talk about. And so, like, for example, which is really strange to me, I just had John Wesley Anderson on, and we had a great conversation about the John Benet Ramsey case. And he talked about the intruder theory, which is the minority theory, in that most people believe that it was the family or the
Yeah.
brother, which is
What do you think?
consequent. So before I did the interview, I would have told you that I believed it was the brother and that the family covered it up. I've always kind of believed that. After I talked to John, I think he's probably right. I think that somebody came into the house. Uh,
Yeah.
the
I,
the
I did
evidence.
I did a couple of shows about John Bennett Ramsey. Maybe in the future we can do a show together because I know that you have a lot of information, man. It would be great to have you here talking about John Bennett.
Yeah, I'm in. Yeah,
Cool.
it's fascinating. There were things about that I just didn't realize. Like, for example, the knots that were tied on John Bonet and how tight they were tied. And, she had slip knots around her. And so that's not something a 9-year-old knows how to do. I don't care if you
Yeah.
were in the Boy Scouts or not, right? To do that in the dark and to be able to do that the way that it happened is not possible. And so it was little things like that that I didn't really understand before that really changed my opinion. I did an episode not too long ago with, oh my goodness, I'm trying to think of what his name is now, Michael Hawley,
Yeah.
about Jack the Ripper. And so that's always been a really interesting case. Of course, now we're talking 200 years ago, and nobody's going to know for sure who Jack the Ripper really was. But he believes that it's Francis Tumblety. And I got to tell you, after the interview, he had me convinced. So,
Really?
yeah, I was on the fence before that, and man, he has got some incredible evidence. He's got a new book that's going to come out this year and a new documentary that's going to come out. And the research that he has done is is mind blowing. I think that he is as close as you're going to get to the truth in that case, and of course, at this point, you're never going to be able to prove it for sure. But
Wow.
yeah, the
No,
Tumbledy
definitely,
connection.
definitely we have to do a show together, man, about that. I'm excited already. Yeah, sure. And tell me something, Jeff. I was reading or listening to your show. I don't remember. You contacted BTK?
Yeah. So I am really, really good friends with basically BTK's surrogate daughter. When he, of course, went to prison and everything, his family kind of disowned him. He had nobody, and there was this one young lady that ended up visiting him very regularly in prison, and so she got to know him really, really well. She still talks to him like pretty regularly, and so like she has his will, so when he dies she has to spread his ashes and all kinds of stuff. Anyway, when I was writing my book, Dennis is the last chapter in the book. So when I started working on that, I said, hey, I'd like you to get me in contact with Dennis because I'd like to ask him some questions for the book, and I'd be interested if he had any information. So she did. She connected the two of us. So me and him have had several conversations about the book, about various other things. And so, every once in a while, I'll write him a letter. I often contact him over, he has an iPad, so he'll contact me through there, or he'll send messages to her and she'll relay them to me. So yeah, it's been interesting. And it's funny. This is one of the weirdest things. He messaged me back when I sent him the picture of the cover of the book, right? So I sent him
Yeah,
a picture of it, and he was super excited that he
because
was
you were
right
there.
next to Holmes, right? So Holmes was always his favorite, and I had nothing to do with the cover of the book. The publisher did that. My buddy Kenny Baker actually did the illustrations, but I had nothing to do with the cover. It was completely random that him and Holmes ended up next to each other, but he was so proud that he was on the cover and he was next to his idol. So
Wow. No,
still
the-
narcissistic till the day he
that-
dies.
wow, man. And what do you want to do with those communications? Is going to be part of a book? Is going to be part of a documentary, or what
You
do you
know,
want to do with that
I don't
information?
know. I don't know. I think it depends. I use some of it because I was part of an anthology for an upcoming book. I got asked to write a chapter in it, which was really kind of cool because there's some pretty big named true crime authors that are in this anthology, and I was fortunate enough to be asked to write a chapter. The the chapter that I wrote is entitled "Stalking, BDSM, and the Illusion of Control." And so I heavily feature the BTK case in there and talk about some of the psychology behind that. And so I talk about BTK, I talk about Bundy, I talk about uh, oh my goodness, why can't I think of his name? The
Jay
Toy
Z.
Box Killer. No, the Toy Box Killer, David Parker Ray, and I talk about the Toolbox Killers, Bittaker and Norris, because they all had elements of that in their crimes.
That
So I
was
talk about
Israel case. That was the
no,
tool.
no,
No. Okay.
no. The Toolbox Killers were Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris,
Okay.
down in L.A., and they were like, man. So let me tell you this. I've listened to some audio of some things, and I listen to a lot of shit, and very little of it bothers me. The only two things that have ever really bothered me were the audio that David Parker Ray would play for his victims when they would wake up from the medication that he gave them, and that 30-minute long description of what he was going to do to them over this next coming weeks was really fucked, and listening to that bothered me. And the other thing was Bittaker and Norris. There's a video, or maybe an audio of them killing one of their victims, and the
Oh,
things that they were saying to their victims, they use it to like desensitize FBI agents and stuff. And it is the most horrific shit I've ever heard.
yeah.
Yeah, it is really, really bad.
Wow.
The way that they talk to that girl as they're twisting off her nipples is just terrifying.
Eh,
So yeah,
Jeff, now that you are very familiar with the BTK case, uh, I don't know if you heard about that theory or hypothesis that there is a copycat killer, that Dennis Rader was actually like a copycat, and there are like two BTKs. Did you hear something
interesting.
about it? No?
No, you know what he wanted me to cover in the book, and I did for him, was the theory that he was the Zodiac.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
and there's a theory out there. There's a lady that wrote a book about it, and I ended up getting a copy of her book and reading through it, and I used a bunch of that. But he asked me to cover that because they have the FBI has come and talked to him, I think, on 4 separate occasions, uh, questioning him about being Zodiac. It's not true; he was not Zodiac, but
Yeah.
it's an interesting theory, and he asked me to do it, so I did it.
Do you know this criminal profiler, Pat Brown, by chance?
No, no, I
She,
don't.
she has a channel in YouTube. It's really cool. She was working in the Madeleine case, Madeleine McCain case.
Yeah,
She was in Portugal working on that investigation. And, anyways, she has a great channel, and she was covering Delphi too. And she has a couple of videos talking about BTK, and she's talking about the possibility of having a copycat in that yeah situation. Maybe you can take a look. It's really cool, and she's very professional. She's awesome, man. Pat Brown, criminal profiler.
yeah, I'll check
So
that out. You know, it's interesting to think if there was more than one during that time. I think it's an interesting theory. I don't think that that Dennis's narcissism would allow that.
mhm.
Right?
No,
I think,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I think that like just the way that he is, I think that if there was somebody out there or he was trying to copycat somebody else, that like I don't know, I think he would have a hard time with that because he is just so very, I don't want to say proud necessarily of his body of work, but I mean he is.
Yeah, he is.
You know, one of the things that I talked to with my friend about was I asked her early on. I said, you know, I really want to understand Dennis as far as how he feels now. You know, all these years after that, does he feel any remorse at all? Does he have any problem with what he's done with all these years to think about it? And she told me that Dennis has very little remorse for the murders that he committed, except for the children.
Ah, yeah.
He has a problem with that, and he does not like the fact that he did that.
Ah,
So
really?
he regrets doing that, and he regrets murdering the children. But he cares nothing about the women or the men.
Okay. Oh, that's
So
interesting.
yeah, so I thought that was, uh, I thought that was an interesting insight into his psychology. That
Hmm.
he at least has enough feeling
Hmm.
to feel something there that he
Some humanity
realized.
there.
Yeah, like that was interesting to me.
Yeah, great, man. Listen, Jeff, it was fascinating, this conversation. I really enjoyed this chat, man, and I hope it's not gonna be the last one, because it was really, really cool, man, having you here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I enjoyed it. I appreciate you doing the review because that was super cool. I listened to that and I was like, oh shit, that's not so bad. I like it.
And maybe if you catch the replay someday, you're gonna see that it was rock and roll in the chat, because we have 50% pro prosecution, 50% pro Allen, and it was like a little bit shaky there. But anyway, that's part of the game.
Yep.
So No, man, I think that's it for today, and I really appreciate again you accepting the
Oh,
invitation.
let me say this real quick.
Yeah, for sure.
I thought it,
You have all the
I
time in the
thought
world here.
I thought it was really really funny because when you look at the views on the 3 videos that I posted, right now the Delphi video 1 has over 3,000 views. Video 2, the defense side, has like less than 300. I think it's like maybe it's 305 or something now. The third one on the theories and appeal has like it's getting close to 1,000 views now. But it was interesting to me to look at the psychology of people watching the videos to see where they were. And I had people that would watch the first one and immediately be angry at me because they're like, "Well, all you believe in is the prosecution." And I
Right.
said, "Hey, listen, watch all 3 videos because that was the whole point. The reason why I did it the way that I did." And there was a documentary on the Zodiac, consequently, that they did. I can't remember which one it was now, but the first 2 episodes they went through, and I got to tell you, they proved to me that it was the guy that they were saying it was, right? And then in episodes 3 and 4, they deconstructed everything they said in the first 2 episodes. And were like, by the end of it, you're like, oh my God, that was such bullshit. Like, there's no way that that was true.
Hmm.
That was the exact way I wanted to structure that series. I wanted to take it very non-committal and say, this is the prosecution side. This is why they convicted Richard Allen. This
Hmm.
is what the defense believes. And here is what I think. And so I did it that way on purpose. And like I encourage people out there, if you're going to watch the first video, at least watch the other 2 too, so that you see the full story and you understand. Just don't write me off after the first one because I just talked about the prosecution.
Yeah. No, no, that was really smart. The way you did that, because you were like playing the angel, playing the devil. It was uh, it was really cool. And yeah, man. And when I did the reaction of your video, my viewers they really liked the way you, yeah, you created that plot, let's say, because as you say, uh, you are the one who has to take your own decision or your conclusion based on the information that is being presented. As you said at the beginning, if there's a documentary saying this, don't take it for grant. Do your own research, investigate, and then you can make your own decision, take your own conclusions. Let's
Yep.
say.
I always say that the only opinion that matters is your own. That's the only one that really matters to anybody. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what anybody else says. Ultimately, you're going to believe your own opinion over anybody else's. Doesn't mean it's right. Also, doesn't mean it's wrong. But at least have an informed opinion so that you know what you believe.
Yeah, for sure. And we have Farmer here. Farmer is my friend. We do some collaborations together from time to time. And he just dropped the link of your channel. So, guys,
Nice.
please go subscribe to Jeff's channel. It's awesome. And yeah, man, again, it was really, really cool to have you here.
Absolutely, man.
Send me also the links to in the description of this video. I'm gonna put the links to buy your book
Okay.
and
Yeah.
to subscribe to your channel. So if you can send me that information by email, we can put that on the description of the
Absolutely.
video.
So let
And
me. I got to show you this because this is really funny.
yeah,
I decided to wear this shirt tonight. I've not worn it very often, but it's one of the ones I got a whole clothing line too, but that's inconsequential. But this is a really funny shirt. It's got Ronald McDonald at the top and John Wayne Gacy down here, and the text bubble says, "John, I've killed more people than you even thought about." Sorry,
you
that is my very dark sense of humor.
did you buy it or did you make it?
No, I made it.
You made it? Ah, cool, man. Yeah, man. Oh, that was great. So I don't know. Anything else from your side?
No,
Something I didn't ask you, or something you want to talk about? I don't
no,
know.
I think we covered it pretty much all. You know, I am currently on that long road to 1,000 subscribers. You know, we're when you first start out, you're trying to get to that hump so everybody can get monetized, right?
Sure.
And so I'm on the long road to that. But I'll tell you, doing the Delphi series, I almost tripled my viewership. I didn't expect that. I
It's
did it
crazy.
because I wanted to do it, and I was glad that it got the attention that it deserves. So yeah, you know, as long as that continues happening and we can continue making good content and bringing people on and having these conversations, I am 100% in.
No, and you're gonna get there really soon because you have a great voice. You are entertaining. You are charismatic. You are professional, and you do a great content, man. So it's gonna be a matter of maybe months. You're gonna
Yeah,
get there really soon, man.
yeah.
I'm doing that prediction right here, right now.
I appreciate it, man. Uh,
Yeah. So stay in touch, Jeff. Thank you so much again,
Absolutely,
and
absolutely, brother. Thank you
see
guys. I appreciate you all.
see you guys in the chat. Stay in touch. See you next time. Ciao.